Okay,
Let's
Christy, you
do
ready
it
for the
again.
actual opening? You ready for the actual opening? Here we go.
Let's do
You
the
ready?
actual opening.
Okay. Here we go.
Okay,
Here we go.
okay,
Here we
okay.
go.
And scene.
Ma. Okay. Hi, I'm Jay Carter.
And I'm KM Carter, and you are
you're listening
watching
to
Professional Eyes.
We're
I think
apparently
that's
both
the best
listening
it's
and
gonna get.
watching. Yep, we're gonna move on now. Hi there, we're back from a long hiatus. I think we
Yeah.
last posted on Facebook in 2020, but we started that thing back in 2018, and it's been a second. So those of you who weren't born yet, welcome.
And also those of you who don't know who the heck we are, and for those of you who are new to my channel over on KM Carter, this is my brother, and we both do geeky, nerdy things. He likes to do tabletop gaming, and he is a game developer. So we love stuff. We love sci-fi. We love fantasy. We're deeply invested. We like myth.
What we both share, Krista, I think, is a love of stories.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Because I think role-playing games ultimately are about our stories as we express them through fictitious characters. And writing, I think, to a certain degree, would you agree, is about writing about our truths through the written word.
Yes, and I especially like fantasy and sci-fi because it allows us to explore alternate realities and explore pieces of our psyche that we might not be able to do in things like standard fiction. It allows you to get way out there. It allows you to get religious and mythological and experiment with different political ideas, like the whole Dune universe or Game of Thrones or stuff like that.
Can you tell it's our first day back? Hi, welcome.
Hi. So today,
Krista, I like that you and I both have blue mandalas behind our heads.
Isn't it great? That was totally not coordinated. I actually have never seen that tapestry. What's that?
You had yours, and I happened to have one that was available, and I was like, well, I'm going to go matchy-matchy, so.
Oh, well, that's so nice. I thought you used to have this cool Green Man one, and I wanted to see that.
Yeah, that's over there. It's on the other side.
It's on the other side. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's on that other wall. Okay, great. Yeah. The theme that I put on here, the tag I'm going to put on this video is Lucasfilm, a eulogy.
Oh, no. You are throwing down.
I'm throwing down. It's about time.
Enemies there.
It doesn't matter. My enemy is the people who are making this crap content with these beautiful franchises that you and I have always liked. Okay. We can discuss it peaceably because that's what I do. I
Hot take out of the gate.
Hot take. We're doing it. So the Acolyte, Willow 2, and the Death of Myth. That's what I put on this index card. Whether or not we talk about it, I guess we'll find out.
Cue the Robert Downey Jr. meme of him rolling his eyes because.
So how far into the Acolyte did you get before you were like?
So my stepdaughter and I have been watching shows together for a while now. And one of the things that we like to do is to tap in to the Disney Plus specials and see what's going on. And if we like it, we go for it. She was very into Ahsoka, I will say. And she even got herself a lightsaber, a real actual light up lightsaber, like with the sounds and everything for graduation. So needless to say, when we saw the Acolyte, we were like, yo, let's go. And like about halfway through the first episode, we were like, eh. And then like as soon as the episode ended, we both looked at each other and we were like, mid.
Yeah.
But we watched the second episode anyway because we were like, maybe it'll pick up like Andor did, because Andor was actually pretty good. It took me a second. Andor took me a couple episodes to be like, what is going on? Why does any of this matter? I don't know. It's
right.
But after a while, it was like, oh, this is really good. And then Acolyte kind of just collapsed like a flan in a cupboard.
Yes. To quote Eddie Izzard, yes, collapse like a flan in a cupboard. I made it through to episode 3, and I don't know if you've seen any coverage on episode 3. You get to see the clan of mothers that created and raised the twins, and they are not space. They are force witches. Yes. Which I understand it can be canonical. And so, look, I wasn't upset about that at all. I mean, I think that's great. I would love to see matriarchal societies. I think that's great. I don't like the way it was portrayed. They ended up having a musical number, and I was like, oh, no, 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 no.
So let me get this straight. You're telling me that the very first live action representation of force witches included a musical number.
And it was bad. It was very, it was bad. Okay. Yeah, it was. And so I was like, at first I was like, no, I'm going to hold my peace. They're doing what they're doing, and it's fine, and it's not made for me, and it's fine. But then a couple days later, I was like, no, I'm not going to let this one slide. I'm just not. Here's why. It's actually not because of the Star Wars universe. Because look, if the younger generation is responding to things like Ahsoka and heaven forbid Kenobi, if they're responding to those, fair enough. Okay, maybe it's not for me anymore. Maybe Disney is reinterpreting this for a younger generation, or at least attempting to. I heard that many adults really liked Andor, and people keep telling me to watch Andor. So I'm like, I haven't seen it. I'd be happy to see it. But this broke the camel's back previously from Willow 2. It's because I'm like, you're not even trying. Okay.
Okay. Well, I would like to pause for a moment and shout out all of the people who have the technical skills necessary to make this kind of thing a reality.
Right.
The production team, the graphic design team, the people who developed the visual effects and everything, they've done their jobs and they've done it well. I think the thing that makes or breaks the show is ultimately whether or not it grips the audience in such a way that causes them to want to go along with the main characters on this ride. And I think one of the things that detached me, if you're talking about the structure of the story itself and nothing else, it's that I didn't have a protagonist to hold on to. Now, there are a lot of reasons why people might say that, it might not appeal to me, but personally it was, you've got this case of mistaken identity. You've got twins, where twins have been done over and over and over again.
Including in the original Star Wars, for crying out loud.
Literally the same thing. You've got a dyad in the Force, which was like attempted in the third trilogy of Star Wars, and I didn't understand what it was. Yeah. So it was hard for me to get behind it and say, oh, this is, okay, dyad in the Force. I know what this is. I understand what's going on here. This is going to be interesting and cool. I feel like at this point it's become the story of Star Wars, and the storylines, the intertwining storylines of Star Wars are to a point akin to the Marvel comics. Here's what I mean by that. It's that there are so many different storylines for people to enjoy, and some of them are actually very, very good, but not everybody who has seen every show has seen every other show. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm getting into, like, there, for example, I went back just to refresh on this topic before you and I spoke in our little podcast today. I went back and I watched a couple of reviews of the first and second episodes, and the person doing the video was like pulling from all sorts of like, yeah, here's the Star Wars animation series, and here's this other thing, and here's this movie, and here's this comic book, and here's this book that's no longer canon. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love your geeky nerddom, but also I don't have all of that to come from. And I think I was able to then identify, now I know what it feels like for people coming into Marvel, because I am levels of deep in Marvel, and I am that level of deep in Star Wars. So it was hard for me to get into it. It was hard for me to understand what was going on, why things were relevant, and also to follow along with this thing that I just didn't understand.
Yeah. And so a big part of, I mean, let's move it over. Let's shift it over to a slightly different franchise, a completely different franchise within Lucasfilm, right? Because this is not a Star Wars problem. This is a Lucasfilm problem. The people who took over, the people in charge who took over Lucasfilm, it's up to them what they want to decide to do with the franchise. If they want to leave the movies as they are, that's fine. They want to do a sequel or a preschool or whatever. Like, you and I have had like really long, geeky, nerdy discussions about the Willow franchise, for instance, and like everything that we would do for a prequel to Willow, which could be really, really super cool. It's this beautiful world, again, created by George Lucas. I don't think he's necessarily much of a script writer per se, but he's very imaginative and he comes up with really good ideas. And if he gets the right people around him, like what happened on the original, the very first Star Wars film, like what happened around Willow, for instance, I think that if he can have other people around to help execute his ideas well, they really, really work out. And I feel like in the second Willow, like, I don't even think I got through the first episode. The screenwriting, and they pulled Willow too from Disney Plus. That's how bad it was. I wonder that they haven't done the same thing with the Acolyte. I don't know what they're going to do when the show is over. Whatever it is, for better or worse, they're getting lots of traction on it right now because people are all fed up. But I was fed up with Willow too. Part of what I'm saying is part of what I loved about the originals was actually not just the acting and the screenwriting and the characters, even though those were all very wonderful. It was also a very important part of the experience for me was the sets and the costumes and the feeling of a lived-in world and the craftsmanship of the puppets, which was a big deal. And especially in terms of Willow, the CGI, actually in terms of Star Wars as well, there was a lot of really proto CGI, fantastic stuff that still holds up to this day. I mean, the craftsmanship was just out of this world. So it's a full package for me. It's not just the plot and the writing and the characters and the acting, although a lot of people end up pointing to that. So when, for instance, I was watching Willow 2, I was deeply disappointed by the costuming. The costuming was a huge part of my experience for Willow 1. I mean, it all felt very organic.
What is it about the costuming that disappointed you?
So
lay it out there. Tell me what bothers you.
Where Willow walks in and he's just clearly wearing, like, I'm looking at it from the front. I'm really deeply interested in his costuming because in the first film, everything was made with like this organic, beautiful, it looked like actual folk trim. It looked like something that reasonably could have been made by his actual Nelwyn tribe, you know? And in Willow 2, he walks in and I'm looking at this vest thing that he's wearing that's got like pockets on it that looks like it was made by machine, like in China or some crap. And then he turns around and I look at the stitching, like I actually pause it and look at this. I'm like, is he wearing a denim vest? I lost my crap. I don't know if you remember, but I texted you and I was like, is he wearing a denim vest? I said, I hate this show. I freaked out. If I could have, I would have made a video on it then. But that's what I'm saying. That's why it's like the Acolyte broke me, because I'm watching the Acolyte and I'm looking at these costumes and now they did an interview with the costume designer. I haven't seen any of the other things that she's done. And look, it's not terrible. It really isn't. But with a lot of for instance, with the makeup in the Acolyte, there's a lot of people who are in full makeup, like bald cap, full green. We've got several characters that have horns, glued on things, and then they've got this face paint. The problem is that it looks like face paint. It literally looks like they used face paint from the Halloween store.
Yes.
And it looks like makeup. It doesn't look like skin.
I
And I
have
like,
several things I would like to say concerning the
okay.
aliens in the Acolyte, but please proceed.
Okay, so to just wrap that up, because I want to hear your opinion on that, it's the craftsmanship. Okay, that's what it's, the craftsmanship and the love. And I feel, and it's the same thing with the musical number that they had in the Acolyte with these women. I'm like, dude, if you're going to have cool witches, like make them cool. And I, bless the composer, but come on, man. It sounded like you were recording just some teenage chicks in a room somewhere. The power of one, the power of many. I'm like, oh gosh, it's embarrassing because the type of scores that we got in the original films, the type of stuff that we got from John Williams, for crying out loud, it just, the level of craftsmanship was it was just, there's no reason that these have to be this cheap, especially with the look that they actually got out of Andor. I mean, Andor actually looked lived in. You know what I mean? There was a sense of craftsmanship. I want to hear what you have to say about the stuff I just said. Go.
So here we go. I hear what you're saying about how Willow 2, which by the way, I'm going to not refer to it as Willow 2 because that makes it sound like it was a sequel. And in my opinion, it is not. It is
Right.
simply an
Totally.
anomaly that existed on streaming space for a while and is literally no longer available. So it was Willow asterisk, I guess.
Right? Question mark?
Um, it was Willow inspired. It was something, anyways. But what I can say is that if what we're doing is we're lining up, here's a Lucasfilm property, here's a Lucasfilm property, here's another one, and here's another one. Let's compare all of them, and as you know, sort of weigh whether or not the net effect is positive or negative. Then what I would say is, yeah, the Willow streaming show definitely did not have the quality when it came to the writing and the story and the
The
I,
acting.
I,
I mean, let's admit it.
the acting was not as good as I would have liked.
Yeah.
I agree with you about, like, again, as I said about the Acolyte, the special effects artists are doing their job. The people who are producing things are doing their job. They're making it look good. They're making it look interesting. I agree with you that there were some anachronistic elements, like the jean vest, that seemed a little weird to me. I was like, okay, but like, give me some context for that. Help me, bring me along
Right.
on that ride, folks
Hmm.
who are running this show. Like, give me an excuse to believe that denim exists now and why. If you want it to feel like it's more modern in terms of the way that it looks, cool. Give me a reason to believe that, as opposed to just throwing it in with no explanation whatsoever. Um, so if what we're saying is we're holding up the Willow streaming show and the Acolyte against each other and saying Lucasfilm is failing, I don't know. I mean, they did a lot of really other cool stuff. Like I felt like Andor was really good, and I felt like Ahsoka was pretty cool. It was a lot more meaningful for people who had seen the Star Wars animated series. But you know, I can say that at least as far as those two properties were concerned, Willow and the Acolyte, they got some work to do. They tried to make a cool, fun thing, and that was awesome. But I think they're not using the property to its fullest potential. And I think specifically in the case of Willow, they're not. I think they're not honoring the source material as they ought to. Now, specifically as concerns the aliens. As I said, I have several things I would like to say about aliens, but this is going to
Is
go
this in
broader
the
topic and
Acolyte?
then it's more specific, okay?
Okay.
So we are all aware of the genres of sci-fi that exist out there. You got your Star Wars, your Star Trek, you got Battlestar Galactica, you got all sorts of other properties, right? Aliens, historically speaking, when it comes to older shows, have been subject to the technology of their age. Now, some shows have done this very well, some very poorly. The earliest Star Trek shows, for example, have a lovable and very nostalgic rubber lizard head on a person, and that's all
Right.
fine. The Gorn are famous for being notably terrible in the original series, but they got real freaking cool when it came to like Discovery and the other, my wife calls it Captain Hair. What's the one with the, not Enterprise, Strange New Worlds. That was a good show. Anyways,
Okay.
but here's what I like about this, and I'm getting to Acolyte, but just give me a second. What I like about it is that they created an alien in the Gorn, specifically in Strange New Worlds and Discovery,
Mhm.
that felt like it wasn't a human with forehead prosthetics. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
It was a CGI creation, necessarily so. Did they have, like a motion cap actor do anything to create how the Gorn moved? Probably not. It was probably completely CG. But it was believable as an alien in a way that a human with forehead prosthetics wasn't. Here
Mhm.
we come to the Acolyte. I appreciate that the Acolyte is pulling from historical canon sources, like the comics, like the cartoon show, like all sorts of other things. Okay, I get that. But when a bald lady with green face makeup walks on screen and I'm supposed to take her seriously as an alien, I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no.
Nope.
That's passable cosplay,
Right.
but it's not really good world building. I feel
Hmm.
like human with green skin and a bald head is not enough for me to believe that they are aliens.
Right.
Um, so when it comes to, put some horns on them, I mean, cool, that's getting closer to alien in my mind, but they're not really different enough for me to feel like they are notably apart from humans.
Hmm.
Now, you've got several examples in the Star Wars movies, especially the early Star Wars movies, that may be a little cliche and trite at this point, but at least they are memorable. If I say a single phrase, you will know who I'm talking about. It's a trap. And you can imagine in your mind what that alien looks like. I don't have to explain to you what that alien looks like because you know, because it was so striking in the moment. That's
Yeah.
very different than bald person with green skin walking onto screen and
Well,
saying,
and
"Hi, I'm an alien."
right, the fish head guy, I mean, again, we were working with Jim Henson's Creature Shop or whatever it's called, Jim Henson Productions, and they are notorious for making all of their prosthetics, all of their puppets, whether it be full body or whether it be like Jabba the Hutt or that little screechy guy, Of course they're right. We know that they're puppets. It's registering that they're puppets, but because they blend with the colors and the tone and they because we see little moving parts on them because essentially because they're made with high levels of craftsmanship, like Jabba the Hutt looks slimy. He looks terrible, right? He looks awful.
Big old prosthetic
Feel
tongue.
you can feel the slime through the camera.
Yes.
It's incredible. Or Yoda. I don't know about you, but CGI Yoda was never it for me.
No.
It's more believable as a physical puppet in space, as in spatially in the
Yes.
space next to Luke, on his shoulder, all the things. It's like that reads to me because I get it, it sucks me in so far. That reads to me as in it's an actual little being.
Chris
It's
said,
like Jurassic Park. How did they get the dinosaurs to do that?
right. You and I are of an era, I think, where those of us who have seen like Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal, speaking of Jim Henson Productions, you
Right.
look at Aughra from The Dark
Yes.
Crystal, she's incredible. Like when she
Small
walked onto
person
screen,
in a puppet head.
like
Gorgeous work.
my reaction was, oh my gosh, she's beautiful. And
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk
Yeah.
about standards of beauty all you want, but
Oh, yeah.
come on, when you see something as intricate and sculpted and lovingly crafted as the Aughra puppet, holy crap, I want more creatures like that. She's a one-off. There's no other
Right.
creatures like her, and she's still believable as her own unique thing that is different from a Gelfling, from a Skeksis, from a human, from anything else. You have her
Absolutely.
walk onto screen, and I'm like, oh, I need to listen to you. You know stuff.
Yeah, because the character is there. It's not just green face paint and a fake tattoo on a bald cap, right? There's craftsmanship behind it. Now, that said, it's a show. It's not a feature film. Gotcha. Totally gotcha. But for $180 million, Jay,
Look, I remember from my
they
days
only
in
had
at
$180 million. I mean, let's cut
yeah,
them a break.
Here's the thing though, it doesn't matter how much money you have. The point
Right.
isn't the point
Boom.
isn't spend a lot of money. The original
That,
Star Wars was produced on a relatively low budget, speaking
that
in terms of whatever. What
100.
you do it well. It doesn't
Mm,
matter how much money you spend on it, but whatever you do it well. If you can't pull off an
yes.
interesting alien creature, then don't put the aliens in there. It's a story about humans. That's fine. I don't care.
Right. Work
Just tell me
within
a
your
story about
budget.
humans if that's all you got.
Right. But if you have the
Um,
budget, spend it on people who have higher levels of craftsmanship. And to me, it's the craftsmanship ultimately that speaks to the fans. I don't mind if you bring in some new ideas, if you bring in new myths, if you bring in new characters, if you bring
mhm.
in various types of people and situations, if you bring in force witches. I am open to all of it. My problem
Right.
is the insult that I feel ultimately is that you're disrespecting something that was made with a high level of craftsmanship with really low levels of craftsmanship, and you're spending a lot of money to bring me a story that's subpar, music that's subpar, costumes that really aren't, that are underwhelming, Jedi, little wrap things that look like you got them from the costume store, stuff that looks like you bought from Joann's, Party City makeup. Come on, people. Like, don't do that. Respect me, give me a new story, say what you want to say, but let's use some craftsmanship, because Disney used to stand for something. They had high levels of craftsmanship too. That's why I was crossing my fingers and hoping that they would do well by Jim Henson Productions and also Lucasfilm. And I just
Mm.
don't feel like they've done that. I wanted to segue over into I don't think a lot of us old timers who were either alive to see the film or were very young when the film was released. Like the first film was what, 77?
You're talking about Star Wars?
Yeah, Star Wars, the original Star Wars.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so I was born in 79. You're a couple years younger than me, so we're both in our early to mid 40s, right? The first time we saw these films was on TV. So, and it was on TV because only popular movies made it to TV, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about your relationship with Star Wars and how you ended up becoming a fan, considering that it was just a tad before our time, and what it means to you now.
Yeah, so in that era of time for me, technologically speaking, was one where the kinds of things I was able to watch were more or less just whatever was literally, I almost said streaming, broadcasting at that moment on television.
Right.
And if it was
With
not
commercials,
that, with
no
commercials,
pausing.
and if, and if it wasn't that, then it was something that we or someone in the family had videotaped and that we were able to watch over and over again. So Neverending Story, as an example, was one of those movies that I remember watching a crappy version of with like
Mhm.
pieces missing because they weren't, taped correctly. And then
Absolutely.
I thought growing up that that was a movie that we had, that we were the ones who owned that movie. I was so young when I first encountered it and I hadn't heard anybody else talking about it, that I was like, oh, well, obviously that's only something that we have. Okay, cool,
Is it
interesting.
Star Wars?
No, that was Neverending Story. Star Wars
Oh,
was different. Star Wars was something that everybody talked about. And so before I'd
right.
even seen it, I knew that it was something that existed out there, that it was something that I hadn't encountered yet. But it was like a country that had been discovered and was, people were like, oh, let's go, let's visit this amazing country. It's so amazing. Have you been there? Have you seen it? And I'm just like, no, so by the time I got to a point where they were starting to release like special editions and stuff like that, and there was this huge controversy over Han shot first, like I was alive when that started.
Right.
So finally, when I got enough friends who were like, oh, if you haven't seen Star Wars, you need to see Star Wars, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Because A, I wasn't alive when it was in theaters. B, I almost never even saw it being broadcast on television at any given time. And C, we didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't go around and just buy a whole bunch of video cassettes for no reason. And so Star Wars wasn't one of the things we had in our library. So by the time I watched it, it was just probably with friends who happened to have it. And I was like, okay, cool, yeah, I've never seen it, let's go. I wasn't part of the generation that had access to it from the get-go. And so I wasn't one of the people who was like, I am a live, breathe, and eat Star Wars kind of person. It was just slightly before my time. So, but as I got into it, I remember I left for California for a couple of years there around 2020. And that was right around when the
Not
episode,
2020, you're talking about 2000.
sorry, 2000. Yeah, my brain
Right. I'm
gets
like,
messed up with it. How long has it been? How old am I? Holy cow. Anyway, so yeah, around 2000,
right,
the prequels are coming out,
right.
and I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, this is gonna be so cool." And when I finally got around to watch it, I was like, "This is great." And then I started hearing people say things like, "Oh my gosh, Jar Jar Binks is so annoying. He needs to die." And I was like, "I don't know. I thought he was fine. I guess he's a weird alien. He's a quirky alien. I'm cool with him."
Mhm.
And then, episode 2, episode 3, and episode 3 came along, and I was like, dude, Mace Windu, you're amazing. That's cool. Purple lightsaber, let's go. And
Yes.
I was like, man, I really want to hear about the Clone Wars. Like, what you really get in the Clone Wars, the movie, is the beginning of the Clone Wars. And that's where I feel like the Clone Wars television, like the animated series,
Mhm.
really picked up and showed you this is how long it took, this is how far reaching it went, and that's how it gives weight then to Order 66. I think
Mhm.
it gave you a
Right.
reason to say this is the beginning of the end for the Jedi. It is important, it is bad, and it makes Luke's journey as the last Jedi, which we know of course he wasn't because Ahsoka was still alive, but who cares,
Right.
the last Jedi, as you know, Luke picking up the mantle of from his father and saying,
Mhm.
I am now being taught by the same mentors my father was. I am now rising to what my father should have been, but never was because he was corrupted by hatred and pride and the inability to let go of somebody that he loved because
Right.
he was
And fear.
traumatized as a child. And
Fear.
so all
Yeah.
of the stuff then built together, and it made me feel like this is a great epic story. And then
Yes.
the third trilogy came out. And I was like, when George Lucas said the words, it's a kind of poetry, I was like, no, that's just an excuse for the same story told over again.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I got off the bus.
And thank you for that, because I think that it's important for us older timers to understand like where we're sitting. And I think that people around you and my age, like people your age and younger who are maybe still in their late 30s, they have a totally different understanding of Star Wars that the people my age and older have. Because I'm a very, very young Gen Xer. I was born in 79, so I'm at the tail end of Gen X. And I was also not alive. This is like 2 or 3 years before I was born that it was made. So I think it's important that we share our experience of it, because because this is a multi-generational franchise that many generations have enjoyed. That's why us older people are having a hard time looking at the low quality, because previously there was always so much investment placed in these shows, and it ended up mattering to us because they invested their skill in it. So for me, from my perspective, when I was very little, like you said, we're brother and sister, so we grew up in the same house. Yes, we had pieces of movies. Sometimes we didn't even have the whole movie. Sometimes we had something that had been recorded off of HBO by our grandpa, or it had been recorded literally off TV, and we were there with the controller,
It
pressing
was a
stop and go.
responsibility. You had
It
a duty
was
to the
it was a thing,
family to be prompt on the
right?
commercials.
Oh my gosh, it's like set time aside. Return of the Jedi is on. That is what was happening.
So I recently was explaining to my stepdaughter the nature of missing something. We're rewatching the Heroes series. And I was like, okay, now imagine what it would be like if you left with this cliffhanger and you didn't get to watch the next episode for a week. And she's like, oh, whatever, I do that all the time with my streaming shows now. And I'm like, you don't understand. Let's say
Yeah.
you missed this episode. Now what you gonna do? And you just
Yeah.
had to live with that. You had to have other people tell you what happened because you couldn't go back and watch it again.
Yeah. Imagine missing Luke, I am your father, and just having people tell you about it because it's no longer in the theater. It's gone. You can't see it.
Right.
and it's not on TV. Like, that's the thing. This is why people lined up around the block to see Star Wars, to see the Luke, I am your father. It was a huge deal. Okay. I was too small of a kid. One of the first film that I ever saw in a theater, Jay, I don't know if you know this, but it was Return to Oz. That is, Mom took me to see Return to Oz in a theater. I was like 5 years old, scared the crap out of me because headless women, like, creepy stuff. That was actually a Disney film. And in the 80s, there was this huge tradition of basically horror films for children where it was just mortifyingly scary and nightmare fuel. And here's the thing, I loved it. Okay. So my relationship with Star Wars actually was a carryover from all of my love of Jim Henson Productions and Steven Spielberg. Okay. Spielberg, Jim Henson, Ron Howard, and Ron Howard was quite a bit younger, but he still was in the zeitgeist. And so Steven Spielberg and George Lucas hung out all the time. Oh, okay, yeah. These people were in like a group. Okay, they talked to each other. There was quotes from characters from Star Wars in E.T. Like, they were back and forth with each other. They were giving each other ideas all the time. And so when I was little and I started to view recorded off TV versions of these shows, I actually absorbed Star Wars as something that was adjacent to both. I considered it as like a team project with Steven Spielberg and Jim Henson Productions. I digested Star Wars as a Jim Henson production. To me, it was like, oh, look, here's the other, there's The Dark Crystal, and there's Sesame Street, and there's Star Wars. They all lived in the same universe to me. And when you were growing up in the 80s and you were my age in the 80s, it was very easy to do that because of the cross-pollination and because they were so popular, you would see like guest star appearances on different things. They were quoting each other in different movies visually. Like, these people were referencing each other all the time. And so I didn't absorb Star Wars as its own thing, as its own universe. It was part of a greater universe of craftsmanship. And so when that craftsmanship was taken out of it, it was a little fascinating for me to see George Lucas Star Wars with the prequels in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? I was an adult by that time. So I was really excited because I loved the original craftsmanship and the experience and the mysticism and the fate and the Luke, I am your father of it, and the drama and the Carrie Fisher pew pew, like, I'm showing up for the pew pew. And I'm showing up for the cool costumes. And man, they really delivered. Like, Queen Amidala was fantastic. I can't say enough about like the sets and the costumes. And of course, John Williams came back, and I'm a huge Williamsite. I love everything he's ever done, basically in the 80s and the late 70s. And so for me, I plot-wise, I was not really a huge fan of the prequels. I was like, oh, he's Force Jesus. Okay. All right. We'll roll with it, I guess. I thought that was kind of cheesy. And honestly, I didn't really mind JarJar Binks either. I'm like, this is clearly a kid character. I was like 20. I was 20, 21. I'm like, this is clearly a character for the kids. It's just a silly guy. It's kind of like an Ewok. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
So I have a thing to say about JarJar Binks, and it ties back into what we've already said. He was a believable alien.
Yes, and
he
a
was
digital,
not human-like.
Right. Yes, and a digital character.
He did not speak the same way that humans speak. He had a different culture than we do. He lived in a different environment than we do. He had, you know what I mean? Like, the only similarities really were that he was like, bipedal, and that they had a boss. Like, that's that governing structure that we basically do, that we humans basically do. And that was about it. They lived underwater in bubble cities. They threw around electrical balls that they called bobas, which that
Hmm.
brings new meaning to boba tea, but whatever.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he had a completely different manner of speech. Now, obviously, there are some correlations between the way that he speaks and other real world cultures. But what I'm trying
Right.
to say here is it wasn't just Green Lady walking on screen speaking perfect
Right.
American English.
Right. There was some sense of culture behind it.
Right.
And definitely eventually you and I are going to get into it about fleshing out characters and mythologies and other stuff as we end up talking about world creation and world building and all of that stuff. I was actually really into getting the restored version and seeing what further technology Lucasfilm was going to do 20 years after the fact. Him going in and changing things, experimenting with the new CGI that was popping up, which I wasn't 100% behind. I was like, yeah, it didn't really execute very well, like putting in extra footage of Han, like, stepping on,
Alice Kale.
yeah, stepping on his tail, stuff like that. I'm like, it didn't really, I preferred the puppet, I'm like, it didn't really work. But I bought the set, that's how
Yeah,
much I loved it.
the
I
first of
always loved it for
many
the
box
craftsmanship.
sets.
Yeah, I bought the box set of the new edited version. Now I want to go back and get the old version.
You
That's
remember when they
that's the
used to
set I
release
want.
movies in like widescreen versus full screen
Full screen.
format?
Yeah, I
You
always
remember
got them
when
in
it
one.
was there was always a difference between those two?
Yeah, I always bought it in widescreen. Back when we had videotapes, I would
Right.
specifically look for the widescreen because I wanted the whole shot. Even though it was smaller, I wanted to. It was always about the craftsmanship for me, the
Mhm.
editors, the filmmaker, all of it. But then again, it's like I love film. I love film and I love writing and I love art. It's because it's about art, and that's what I don't appreciate about what they're doing with Lucasfilm right now. Because and I honestly, I kind of feel the same way about present day Jim Henson Productions too. I feel like with the death of the creators or with the removal of the creators, heart was lost.
I think one thing that I believe about creativity in general is that creativity is a form of self-expression.
Yeah.
You can do something technically well, but not necessarily express yourself through that technicality.
Mm-hmm.
Being creative, whether it's visual, audio, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
is a form of self-expression. So when you lose the individual who created that thing and they can no longer self-express and somebody else has to pick up the mantle and self-express similarly to them, it's never going to be the same. What I don't mind, however, is people self-expressing in new and genuine ways with the understanding that it's never going to be the same as what the previous person had. So bring me the new era of Star Wars. I want the new era of Star Wars. I don't want somebody trying to do the old era of Star Wars without being true to what came before and
Mm-hmm.
making it feel like it's supposed to be a continuation, or it's supposed to be like literally historically, if you look at the fictional timeline of the story they're trying to tell in the Acolyte, it is smack dab in the center of like Republic era. It's like right around the same time as when Grogu was born. It's right around the same time when like Anakin Skywalker was born. Like it's right there in that nest of creativity that has already been trodden, and for people to go back and then try and address characters and civilizations and technology and story that's all happening around the same time, for it to not feel visually and visually compelling or compelling in terms of the way that the story is being written in a similar way. The original Star Wars movies were very pulpy. They were very sort of action hero, like let's go and shoot your way out of the hallway and run and jump and go onto the thing and fly off and we just
Which
made
is
it. Oh my
camp.
gosh,
It's
it's
beautiful
amazing.
camp. I love
It's
camp.
amazing.
Yeah.
But Acolyte is more like a kung fu film that forgot that it was about Star Wars.
Right. Or it's just cheap ripoffs of everything else. And I don't know. To wrap things up, because we're out of time, um, I really appreciate having this conversation with you because it was fun for me as your sister to learn how you feel about Star Wars and where you're at. And I think it's great that we kind of are on the same, like we're in the same space where it's like we're we're always dedicated to new things. We want to see new things. We want to be delighted again. But I think what's happening right now, it just isn't hitting the right space. And so now more than ever, that's part of what I'm encouraging my new viewers to do, is to create new things. I want to see new things, but I want those new things to be done with high levels of craftsmanship, because we all deserve nice things. We all deserve nice things.
Here's the caveat. I think it's fair to say that those people who are being given the opportunity to build on what has come before and are being given the money to make that work as best they can, they are the ones from whom we are expecting the high levels of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
When we talk about people who are doing their own self-expression, being creative and so forth, to whatever degree that they can, I believe in and endorse people telling whatever story they have inside of them. One of the sort of core principles that I live by and create by is any idea you have is worth breathing life into.
Absolutely.
But don't stop. Don't stop breathing life into that idea until it has lived its full life and you find that it doesn't have any more life left to live, and you set it aside and you say, thank you for being an idea that I had. Or it becomes something bigger and better than it started as. Don't stop breathing life into the thing until it is as good as it can be. Okay, that's the message I have, right? If it's not to the level of craftsmanship that you can achieve, keep working on it.
Right, absolutely. Okay, that's a great place to end, because the way that I've encapsulated that idea is keep writing. Jay.
Steve, KN.
It has been so great talking to you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to talk to me on the channel. And please, anybody who's watching, feel free to subscribe if you want to or not. We're probably just going to come back here and talk about stuff because we enjoy talking about stuff together. So if you have any themes that you want us to cover, let us know. And Jay, do you have any parting words?
I want you to know, Krista,
yeah,
that I changed my own bedroom. It is now a studio that one can work from for the purpose of doing the ice. So I put effort into this, and I want to see it come back. So you and we got to talk again.
I'm so appreciative. Okay, great. Well, we'll leave it at that. And guys, thanks for listening. Everybody, thank you for listening. And we will see you again next time on
Professional Eyes.
Are we done talking?
I don't know. I mean, you tell me. What'd you think? Did it go good?
Yeah, I think it went okay. I also have another video that I'm doing, so with this little guy. I think I'm going to do some stuff with this guy.
Okay.